Hey guys, so today we're going to cover chapter 11, haircutting, and this is a pretty long chapter, so what I'm going to do is break this video down into two sections, and we're going to discuss in this part number one, this first part, we're going to discuss types of lines, sectioning for haircutting, we're going to discuss overdirection, hair analysis, haircutting shears, types of haircutting shears, and various haircutting tools. And then we're going to stop right at tension. The second half of this video I will upload later, and that particular video will cover clipper cutting through the remainder of the chapter. It's going to include safety in hair cutting, cutting for curly hair types, and other tips and tricks, including what to do for basic haircuts. So let's hop right into it. These are the 13 objectives. I'm going to let those sit there for a second. You can skim through them, or at this time you can pause the video to read through them. I'm going to keep moving. So why study haircutting? So imagine looking at a haircut and knowing exactly how to recreate the shape. That is going to be your task when it comes to servicing your clients. A lot of times they're going to bring in a photo to you, and you're going to want to know what to do to recreate that shape or that style. So a cosmetologist should study and have a thorough understanding of haircutting because it's the basic foundational skill upon which all designs are built. Being able to create and duplicate a haircut from a photo also is going to build your confidence, trust, and also your loyalty between yourself and your clients. Also, a haircut that is easy to style and maintain will make your clients happy with their experience and also build repeat customers, which will increase your income and also advance your career. Lastly, studying the fundamentals of haircutting will allow you to understand and perfect more advanced haircutting techniques. So objective number 2, cutting lines, sections, and angles. So all haircuts are made up of lines, sections, and angles. A line is a thin continuous mark used as a guide. The two basic lines used in haircutting are straight and curved. The head itself is made up of straight and curved lines. So when you cut lines into a haircut, the hair falls into a shape. There are 3 types of lines in a haircut, or there's 3 types of haircut lines. We have horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. Horizontal lines, as you can see in the photo, these lines are parallel to the floor and relative to the horizon. They build weight, and they also create one length and low elevation haircuts and add weight to any cut or style. Then we have vertical lines. These usually are described in terms of up and down and are opposite of the horizon. Vertical lines remove weight to create graduated or layered haircuts and are used with higher elevations. Diagonal lines, these are lines that sit between horizontal and vertical, and they have a slanting or sloping direction. There's a term that we use with diagonal lines called beveling or stacking, and these techniques are used with diagonal lines to create angles by cutting hair ends with a slight increase or decrease in length. Beveling also can be accomplished by rolling the hair around the index and middle fingers and flipping the hair up or under and then cut. There are 2 types of diagonal lines. You have diagonal forward as well as diagonal backwards. Diagonal forward creates movement towards the face, as you can see in the photo, and diagonal backwards creates movement away from the face. Haircut sections. For control during hair cutting, the hair is parted into working areas called sections. As you can see, her hair is broken down into sections. Each section may be divided into smaller work areas, and we call those subsections. A part, also called a parting, is a line dividing the hair at the scalp. Parting the hair separates one section of hair from another, creating subsections. Sections are made up of curved and straight lines and are sometimes used to subdivide many areas of the head into smaller segments that will be included in the haircut design. There are four types of sections used in haircutting. We have horseshoe, pivoting, profile, and radial. So we're going to break down horseshoe as you can see on the screen. A horseshoe section separates the head at the parietal ridge to below the crown, providing you with control when layering or graduating the hair. A pivoting section, also referred to as a pie-shaped section, rotates from a central point and is used in layering or graduation. A profile section, which is a center forehead to center nape, divides the hair or the head into two sections, left and right profile, and facilitates subsectioning. A radial section is a section that is taken from ear to ear and divides the head from front to back, starting behind the apex in the crown. In hair cutting, we often talk about elevation. So elevation is known as projection or lifting. It is the degree at which a section or subsection of hair is held or elevated from the head when cutting. Elevation creates graduation, a gradual progression of lengths from longest to shortest that are cut to a fixed guideline. It is usually described in degrees. In a blunt or one-length haircut, there is no elevation, therefore, we refer to that as a 0-degree haircut. Elevation occurs when you lift any hair section above 0 degrees. Any haircut that is not a single length requires the use of elevation. The highest degree of elevation is 180 degrees relative to the hair form. You can also check out on the slide where 45 degrees would be projected from the head, and also where 90 degrees would be projected from the head. The most common elevations are 45 and 90 degrees. When the hair is elevated below 90 degrees, meaning when you hold the hair below 90 degrees, you typically tend to build weight, and when you elevate the hair 90 degrees or higher, you remove weight or layer the hair. The hair's length also affects the end result. Longer hair often appears heavier or less layered. Usually less elevation is needed on curly hair than on straighter textures. You will often cut hair, especially curly hair. And when you're cutting curly hair, you want to leave it a little bit longer due to shrinkage. So let's get into finger angle and cutting line. The finger angle is also known as the cutting line. It is the angle in which the fingers are held when cutting the line that creates the end shape. This is also known as the cutting position, the cutting angle, or the finger position. The finger angle can be horizontal, vertical, or diagonal, or degrees can be used to describe the finger angle in relation to the head. Next, in hair cutting, we typically refer to the term guidelines. There are two types of guidelines. Actually, there are a few types of guidelines. We're going to start with what a guideline is. So a guideline is also known as a guide and is a hair subsection that determines the length that the hair will be cut. So essentially, your guideline determines how long the hair or how short the hair will be cut or how long the hair will remain. The perimeter guideline is the hair's outer line, and the interior guideline is the cut's inner or internal line. The guideline is usually the first section cut when creating a shape. The two guidelines typically used are stationary and traveling. So, stationary guidelines. They do not move. All other sections are combed to the stationary guide and cut at the same angle and length. Stationary guidelines are used in a blunt, one-length haircut and in haircuts such as graduated that use overdirection to create length or weight increase. Traveling guidelines are also known as movable guidelines. They travel with you as you progress throughout the haircut. Traveling guidelines are used in creating layered or graduated haircuts. When using a traveling guideline, take a small slice of the previous subsection and move it to the next position or subsection where it becomes your new guideline. This image here shows a blunt haircut. So you see how it has zero elevation. It also has a diagonal cutting line and a stationary guideline. To achieve a layered shape, like as you see in these pictures here, you use a 90-degree elevation with a vertical cutting line and a traveling guideline. In this image, this haircut was cut using a 45-degree elevation throughout the sides and back, creating a stacked effect with a diagonal cutting line. The top was cut using a 90-degree elevation, and the entire shape was created using a traveling guideline. So let's talk about overdirection. Overdirection occurs when you comb the hair away from its natural falling position rather than straight out from the head to increase the design's length. Overdirection is used mostly in graduated and layered haircuts. For example, you are working on a layered haircut and want the hair to be longer toward the front. You can overdirect the sections to a stationary guideline at the back of the ear, or if you are creating a haircut with shorter layers around the face and longer layers in the back, you can overdirect sections to a stationary guideline at the front. As you can see here, combing the hair towards the face or away from the face would be considered to be overdirection. So let's get into hair analysis objective number 3. So there are 4 characteristics that determine the behavior of the hair. Let's start with growth pattern. The hairline is the hair that grows along the outermost perimeter of the face, around the ears, and on the neck. The growth pattern is the direction the hair grows from the scalp. It's also referred to as the natural falling position. Cowlicks, also called whorls, and other growth patterns affect where the hair ends up once it is dry. Cutting these areas with too much tension may result in shorter areas when the hair is dry, as it will fall in its natural position. Remember to hold the hair with zero tension when cutting the hair with growth patterns to ensure the hair will not shrink or stick up in these areas. The hairline, the crown, and fringe are the areas where we often find strong growth patterns, so you want to make sure that you take special care and consideration in these areas. Now let's talk about density. So density is the number of individual hair strands on 1 square inch of scalp. It's usually described as thin, medium, or thick. The density of the hair determines the size and number of subsections needed to complete a haircut. If there's too much hair in one subsection, it is difficult to see your guideline and control the hair because the hair is pushed away as you close the shears, producing an uneven line. Curly and coiled hair with thin or low density may appear to have more hair. When performing hair analysis, consider the curl pattern before making cutting decisions. Hair texture is based on each strand's diameter and is usually defined as fine, medium, or coarse. Understanding density and texture is important because different hair textures respond differently to the same type of cutting. Some hair textures need more layers and some need more weight. For example, straight, coarse hair tends to stick out more, especially if it's cut too short, but fine hair can be cut to very short lengths and still lie flat, so take that into consideration. If you're following along in your textbook, you'll be able to find this chart here on page 254, and it suggests cuts based on hair texture and density. So I recommend that you make a cheat sheet, print this out, or take your notes. And as you can see, it discusses fine, medium, and coarse hair and the different densities and the best ways to cut those types of hair. For example, medium textured hair that has medium density works great for most cuts, and hair can be texturized. It can handle texturizing. If a person has a fine textured hair with thin density, it typically is going to feel limp, it's going to need weight, and blunt ends will make it appear thicker. So again, copy this chart down, make it your cheat sheet so that you can understand what to do when you're in different situations or you're working with your various clients that have different hair textures and densities. The wave and curl pattern, or the amount of movement in the hair strand, varies from client to client, as well as within the same head of hair. A client may have completely straight hair, meaning no wave, wavy hair, curly hair, tightly curled hair, coiled hair, or anything in between. Wave and curl patterns can be categorized into letters and numbers from 1A to 4C. The number determines the amount of curl, and the letter determines the tightness of the waves or curls. Curl type 1 is straight hair, 2 is waves, 3 is spiral curls, and 4 is very coily. Number 4s also may even have a zigzag coil appearance. Remember, curl pattern and texture are not the same thing. Texture refers to the hair strands that are fine, medium, or coarse. And again, your curl pattern or wave pattern is defined as straight, wavy, curly, or extremely coily. As a rule of thumb, type 1 hair can typically be cut with ease, either wet or dry. Types 1A to 3B typically will not shrink or recoil when combing for wet hair cutting. Consider tension when cutting wet. Comb the hair with an all-purpose comb and light tension and allow the hair's natural curl to form slightly before determining your guidelines. Types 3 and 4 should be blown dry before cutting. In some special circumstances, moderate heat can be applied before cutting to ensure an even, uniform cut or trim. Type 3A and above may require understanding how the client wears their hair most often when choosing a style. Cutting lines and layering in hair without texture considerations result in uneven shape when worn curly. Types 3A to 4A may need to be cut dry and in its natural state to visualize the true shape. Types 4A to 4C may need to be stretched or thermally styled for cutting. Always consider the client's hairstyle routine. Next, we're going to get into hair cutting shears, objective number 4. So your hair cutting shears are known as your scissors, and they're one of the most important tools in your career. So having the right size, the right shape, the right type is going to be essential for you to build your career. There are different types of hair cutting shears. Some are made with steel, and out of that steel, some of those are cast shears, meaning they are created out of a mold, which you can see here, or you may work with forged shears. Forged shears, in essence, have various components. They are not made from a cast or from a mold. Here, this slide breaks down the different parts of a shear. Make sure that you are familiar with the ring hole, what the bumper is, what the finger tang is, what the thumb hole is, what the pivot and adjustment areas are, what the cutting edges are. As far as shear maintenance, you want to make sure that you are completing your daily cleaning and lubrication, daily disinfecting, and your daily tension adjustment and balancing. Keeping your shears in the best wear also requires weekly cleaning and lubrication, and you may also have to sharpen them. So if shears are an investment, you want to make sure that if you are investing in a good pair of shears, that you're taking care and you're maintaining them and sharpening them as needed. So let's talk about texturizing shears. Texturizing shears are great for adding texture to the hair. They usually either will add texture or remove bulk. Sometimes we refer to these as thinning shears, tapering shears, or notching shears. So let's break down each one. So chunking shears. Chunking shears usually have between 5 to 9 teeth, and they're great for taking out big sections. And the wider the space between the blades, the more pronounced the cutting will be. Then you have texturizing shears, which have between 14 and 19 teeth, and they're used to add increased blending. Then we have thinning shears, which have 26 to 30 teeth. These are more universally used. They are also used for consistent reduction in bulk. The closer the teeth are, the more blended the haircut is going to be. And then you have blending shears. These typically have 38 to 50 teeth, and they're great for shear over comb cutting techniques. When it comes to handling your shears, you want to make sure that you're always holding and handling them correctly. Your ring finger always goes in the top blade, which we call that the stationary blade, and it sits next to your pinky. And your pinky rests on that tang, as you can see in the pictures here. And then your thumb goes into the bottom hole or the thumb hole, and that is actually your moving blade. So when you're cutting, what you're really working is your thumb and your ring finger and pinky finger. They're resting on the top of your shears. In class, you will learn how to properly hold your shears, and you will have more detailed instruction from your instructors. I also want to take a moment to talk about palming your shears. Anytime that you are not cutting or using your shears, you should be palming your shears. And what that means is you're removing your thumb out of the thumb hole and palming or gripping your shears. This is going to prevent you from cutting hair accidentally or creating an injury for yourself or your client. As you can see here in the far left picture, that is how you palm your shears. You should be able to hold your comb the hair. You should be able to flip your comb over to the tighter teeth or the wider teeth of your comb as you palm your shears. So now we are going to discuss hair cutting tools. So there are a few different tools that we're going to use for hair cutting, and understanding the functions and characteristics of each of the following tools and how to safely handle them is going to help you achieve the best hair cutting results for yourself and your clients. So another tool that we use to cut hair are our hair cutting razors. They're mainly used to create a softer effect on the hair. You can actually cut an entire haircut with a razor. You can also use a razor to thin out hair or to texturize certain areas. Razor cutting is not recommended on relaxed hair as it tends to tear the hair shaft. Although razors are often used to soften ends of extensions for optimal blending, always use caution when razor cutting textured hair as it can tear the shaft, create frizz, and produce uncontrolled shapes. Other tools that we use are clippers, trimmers, and sectioning clips. Wide tooth combs, tail tooth combs, or tail combs, barber combs, styling and cutting combs. And I do like this picture representation. It shows you the difference between cutting hair with a pair of shears, a blunt cut, versus cutting with a razor. Razor cuts cut the hair at the hair ends at an angle, which allows them to be a little bit softer. So hopefully you can see the difference in the top picture versus the bottom picture. The razor cut is always going to give you a softer appearance as opposed to a shear cut. When cutting with a razor, you always cut above your fingers and you always hold that razor at a 45-degree angle. Never hold your razor at a perpendicular angle or at 90 degrees towards the ends of the hair. So if you look at the far right picture, you can see the incorrect angle. The correct angle is in the middle, cutting at a 45-degree angle. You can also cut in a vertical or a horizontal position with your razor. Remember, you always want that razor to hit the hair at 45 degrees. When it comes to holding your razor, you always want to make sure that you have a guard on your razor, and you want to make sure that you open the razor so that the handle is higher than the shank. And you want to place your thumb on the thumb grip and the index, middle, and ring fingers on the shank. You want to place your little finger in the tang underneath the handle. Here is another alternate method of holding your razor, and this is how you palm your razor. So let's talk about handling the comb. The comb's wide and fine teeth are both regularly used when cutting hair. The wide teeth are used for combing and parting the hair, while the finer teeth of the comb is used for sectioning the hair before cutting. Since wider teeth provide less tension, a wide tooth comb may be ideal for textured hair. Finer teeth provide more tension and are useful when cutting around the ears, dealing with challenging hairlines due to a growth direction, and when cutting dense, straight, wavy hair. Practice turning your comb in your hand while palming your shears or palming your razor. And lastly, we're going to talk about tension. So tension in hair cutting is the pressure applied when combing and holding a subsection of hair. Tension is created by stretching or pulling the subsection. Tension ranges from minimum to maximum. Minimum tension is combing the hair and holding the section straight without pulling the hair. Maximum tension is combing the section straight and slightly pulling the hair. You control tension with your fingers when you hold the subsection of hair between them. Consistent tension is important for constant, even results in a haircut. Use maximum tension on straight hair when you want precise lines. With curly or wavy hair, less tension is better because a lot of tension will cause more shrinkage than usual as it dries. Use minimal or no tension around the ears and on the hairline with strong growth patterns or when cutting dry hair into a shape. Alright, so next up we have clippers. So clippers are another way or another tool that we use for hair cutting. They are either electric or battery operated. Your clippers come in different sizes and shapes, and they can be used with or without attachments. There's also clipper blades. Some clippers feature interchangeable blades that are available in a variety of styles, sizes, and lengths, and they can attach the clipper with a single snap-on design. Detachable clipper blades are often used in lieu of clipper guards. And then you have clipper guards, which what you see on the right side. They attach to the clipper blades, and they usually allow you to cut the hair evenly and to an exact length. The lower the number, the shorter the hair. The higher the number, the longer the hair will be. Clipper guards usually range from a number 1 all the way to maybe a number 8 or 10. So they do range in size or lengths. Then we have trimmers. Trimmers are also called edgers, and they're usually cordless, smaller size clippers, and they're mainly used to clean up the necklines and around the ears. You can also use trimmers to trim facial hair. Facial hair can be trimmed with or without a guard. If you don't use a guard for facial hair, it's recommended that you use a comb. So you can do trimmer over comb or a trimmer with a guard attachment. When you're cutting hair, you want to make sure that your body position is correct. You want to be aware of how you're standing and how you are positioned when you're cutting your client's hair. and you want to ensure that your client is sitting straight up. You want to center your weight when you're working, and you want to work in front of the section that you're standing directly in front of. Here are different hand positions that you may use when cutting hair. So you may cut over your fingers. You may also cut below your fingers, or even cut palm to palm. These are techniques that you will practice in school, in class, with your instructors. In terms of safety in hair cutting, always palm your shears and razor when combing or parting the hair. Do not cut past the second knuckle when cutting below your fingers, or whenever you're cutting palm to palm. When cutting around the ears, take extra care to not accidentally cut the client's skin. Cuts on the ear can produce a lot of blood. Lastly, when working with a razor, learn with a guard. Never practice holding, palming, or cutting with a razor without a guard unless directed by and supervised by your instructor. Take extra care when removing and disposing the razor blade. And remember, one razor blade per client if you're cutting with a razor. Other general hair cutting techniques and tips. For all of your haircuts, you want to perform cross-checking. Cross-checking allows you to check the evenness of your haircut. So when you cross-check, you part the hair in the opposite way that you cut, and also at the same elevation to check for line and shape precision. As a rule of thumb, never cut on a cross-check. You only cross-check to check your shape and your length and your evenness of your haircut. When you're cutting curly hair, it's better to understand how the hair behaves once it's dry. You also want to consider how the client wears their hair on a day-to-day basis. When you're cutting curly hair, a blunt cut, a graduated cut, and a uniform cut are all going to look different. Remember, curly hair shrinks more than straight hair. Curly hair can also appear shorter after it dries because of the shrinking effect, so these are things to consider. Also, when you're cutting hair, especially curly hair, you want to maintain consistent dampness when you're cutting it wet. If the client's hair is super coily or curly, it's recommended that you straighten the hair thermally before you cut to get better precise lines. Okay, so let's get into the 4 essential haircuts. The first essential haircut is a blunt haircut. This is also known as a one-length haircut. All the hair comes to a single hanging level, forming a weight line. A weight line is a visual line in the haircut where the ends of the hair hang together. The blunt cut is also referred to as a zero elevation cut or a no elevation cut because it has no elevation or over direction. It is a cut with a stationary guide. Blunt cuts are great for finer and thinner hair types because all hair is cut to one length, therefore making it appear thicker. Next, we have a graduated cut. It is a slow or immediate build-up of weight caused by cutting the hair with tension, low to medium elevation, or over direction. The most common elevation is 45 degrees. In a graduated haircut, there is a visual build-up of weight. The hair ends appear to be stacked. There are many variations and effects you can create with graduation by adjusting the degree of the elevation and the amount of over direction or your cutting line. Next, we have a layered cut. A layered cut is achieved by cutting the hair with elevation or over direction. The hair is cut at higher elevations, usually 90 degrees. Layered haircuts generally have less weight than graduated haircuts. In a graduated haircut, the ends of the hair appear closer together. In a layered haircut, the ends appear farther apart. Layers create movement and volume in the hair by releasing weight. A layered haircut can be created with a traveling guide, a stationary guide, or both. Lastly, we have a long layer haircut. The hair is cut at 90-degree elevation and then over-directed to maintain the length and weight at the perimeter. This results in the length and weight of the hair being elevated from 0 degrees to 180 degrees when it's over-directed. This technique gives more volume to hairstyles and can be combined with other basic haircuts. The resulting shape will have shorter layers at the top and increasingly long layers toward the perimeter. A long layer haircut can be modified depending on the texture and density. For example, fine hair requires more weight in the interior. In this case, use a stationary guide at the center profile and overdirect into the center section with a high elevation and overdirection. On thicker hair, release more weight by using a traveling guide from the center profile section. You can create any haircut using these four basic concepts. So let's get into a few different components and types of haircuts. So let's start with the blunt haircut. A blunt haircut is also known as a bob, a one-length haircut, a one-level haircut, or a page boy haircut. And it is a classic. Blunt cuts can be designed with or without bangs, also called a fringe. So remember our bangs, we also call them the fringe area. And they can also be cut on straight or curly hair and with short, medium, or long lengths. When cutting a blunt cut, you want to be aware of the crown area, sometimes called the danger zone, because this is where irregular growth patterns are most often found. The crown can be challenging when doing blunt cuts, so look at the scalp to see the natural hair growth pattern. Consider cutting this area at the end of the haircut or cut it slightly longer than the guideline. Once the hair is dry, you can see where it falls and match the length to the guideline. Another danger zone is around the ears. Ears do not lay flat against the head, so take special steps to keep the cutting line even. Always work with very little tension to no tension around the ears, unless you're working with shorter layers. So here's an example of making considerations for the crown area and for around the ears. Here are other variations of a blunt haircut. You can do an A-line with a fringe, a blunt bob with a fringe, or a layered bob on curly hair. Here are a few tips to focus on when doing blunt haircuts. You want to get specifics from your client, so consider these questions. Show me where you would like the length to be. Would you like the back to be shorter than the front? And would you like a fringe? Okay, next we have the graduated haircut. So in this basic graduated haircut, you can use vertical, horizontal, and diagonal cutting lines with a 45-degree elevation at the back and 1 finger's depth on the sides and a 90-degree elevation for the layers. Here are some examples of a graduated cut. You have a finished graduated cut, you have a round graduated cut, a classic cut, and so you can see where there are shorter and longer lengths. You can also see where there has been where weight has been added or built into the haircut. You can also see where weight has been removed. So here are some tips for graduated haircuts. Okay, heavier graduated cuts, those with lower elevations, they work well on hair that expands when it's dry. So your coarser texture and curly hair will appear to graduate more than straight hair. Graduation builds weight that can make thin hair or fine hair look or appear thicker or fuller. However, if hair is fine and thin, avoid creating heavyweight lines. You want a softer graduation for those hair types. You also want to check the neckline carefully before cutting the nape short and use the finer teeth of the comb to maintain even tension to ensure a precise line. The third basic haircut is the uniform layers. We call this the 90-degree elevated haircut. Your guide is an interior traveling guideline. And basically each layer is the same length. The resulting shape will appear soft and round with no buildup of weight or corners. The hair's perimeter will fall softly because the vertical sections in the interior reduces weight. This cut can be established on a variety of lengths and textures. Here are some examples of a uniform haircut or where uniform layers are added. Then we have the long layer haircut. So in this long layered style or cut, you begin by cutting the perimeter line, and after the perimeter is complete, You create layers using 45-degree elevations along the front hairline and sides in the front of the ear. Your guide for the interior layers and top will be a center profile section elevated to 90 degrees, extending from the occipital bone to the front hairline. This profile section serves as your guide for the interior layers, which will be over-directed to match the guide cut at 90 degrees. Here are a few tips when cutting uniform and also long layer haircuts. So when layering short hair, best results are achieved with medium to thicker hair density. Cutting thin hair too short can expose the scalp. Coarse hair tends to stick out if cut shorter than 3 inches. This hair texture needs to be extra long to hold it down. When working with longer layer shapes in which you want to maintain thickness at the bottom, keep the top sections longer. Cutting the top layers too short will take away too much hair from the rest of the haircut and may leave you with a collapsed shape that is stringy at the bottom. If the client has hair past the shoulder blades, use slide cutting, which is discussed later in the chapter, to connect the top sections to the length. This will maintain maximum length and weight at the haircut's perimeter. Okay, so let's go beyond our basic hair cutting techniques. Let's talk about the bank area or the fringe. So the bank area includes the hair that lies between the front 2 corners or approximately between the outer corners of the eyes. Because much of our hair cutting history comes from England, sometimes you'll hear the word fringe used instead of the word bangs. They both mean the same thing. When cutting bangs, you want to note that you want to comb the hair into its natural falling position. And you want to make sure that they fall no further than the outer corners of the eyes. You also want to ensure that the hair is either damp or completely dry before you cut. You want to also ensure that the client's eyes are closed and the brows are relaxed and in their natural resting position. When it comes to natural distribution, we're talking about where and how the hair is moved. It's important to work with the hair's natural distribution. Otherwise, you'll end up with shorter pieces falling where they don't belong, or ruining the lines of your haircut. When it comes to asymmetric bangs, they're designed for all hair lengths, so it just depends on what you and your client have agreed upon. An asymmetrical bang does make a statement and can vary from subtle to very bold. Then we have side split bangs, which are used most on mid-length to long hair. This bang is worn on the side and works great for clients with natural side parts. Versatile bangs are ideal for all hair lengths. This bang type can be worn on either side. And you can create a versatile bang with a shear or a razor. Curly bang are designed for all hair lengths. This bang type can be worn on either side as well. And then we have square bangs. Square bangs are designed for all hair lengths. And this bang is created using a shear and can be worn heavy or very soft. I mentioned slide cutting a few minutes earlier. So slide cutting is a method of cutting or layering the hair in which the fingers and shears, they glide along the edge of the hair, and it's useful for removing length. You can also use this technique for blending shorter lengths to longer lengths. You can also use it for layering very long hair to keep the weight at the perimeter or to create soft ends. Shear over comb is a barbering technique that helps us to blend our haircuts together. In this technique, you hold the hair in place with the comb while using the tips of the shears to remove length. Shear over comb creates very short tapers and allows you to cut from one extremely short length to longer lengths. In most cases, you'll start at the hairline and work your way up to the longer lengths. Here is an example of a shear over comb technique. And again, we will cover these in class with your instructor and guide you properly on how to perform shear over comb as well as clipper over comb. You will also hear the term texturizing used in hair cutting. So texturizing is the process of removing excess bulk without shortening the length. It can also be used to cut for the effect within the hair length, causing wispy or spiky results. Texturizing should not be confused with hair texture. Texturizing techniques can add or remove volume, make hair move, or blend one area into another. They can also compensate for different densities that exist on the same head of hair. Texturizing can be done with shears, cutting shears, thinning shears, or even a razor. If we're texturizing with shears, more than likely we are going to be performing point cutting. Point cutting is when you take the tips of your shears and you point cut or you cut into your cutting line at a point or angle. It creates a broken edge. You can also texturize with shears, and we call that notching, which is another form of point cutting. That can be done with straight or notching shears. Just know that when you do notching, notching is more aggressive. As you can see in the picture, you see how spaced those teeth are. You're going to take off a lot more hair. It's going to create a chunkier effect. You can also do freehand notching with your shears with the same motion as point cutting, and we can also do effilating with our shears. And effilating is when you're taking the shears from the ends of the hair towards the scalp to create texture in that manner. We can also slice with our shears. We can also slice with our texturizing shears. And with slicing, you are basically removing weight and adding movement throughout the hair length. And again, it's just a texturizing technique that you will cover with your instructors. And if you have questions, definitely let us know below. If you want to carve, carving is a version of slicing that creates a visual separation in the hair. And what you usually do with carving is you have to twist the hair, and then you're going to be moving the shears throughout the hair, gently opening and closing them partially as you carve or cut that hair. There is also a such thing as texturizing with a razor. We can remove weight to taper the ends with a razor, and you can also do freehand slicing with a razor. And both of these are techniques that will give you a softer look or a softer perimeter. And here are differences. It shows you the difference between not adding texture and adding texturizing techniques. So on the left, you see a graduated haircut without texturizing. On the right, she has some texture. She has some movement. She has some softness. Same thing. Here's a uniform layered haircut without texturizing. And on the right, it's more texture. It's texturized. It's a little bit more choppy. Okay, so objective 13, basic clipper cutting. So with basic clipper cutting, the hair is cropped close along the bottom and sides and becomes longer as you travel up the head. The distance between the comb and the scalp determines how much the hair will be cut. The clipper can be positioned horizontally, vertically, or diagonally. The clipper over comb techniques allows you to cut the hair very close to the scalp and create a flat top or a square shape. Use the comb the same way as when working with a shear over comb. The main difference is that the clipper moves across the comb, which requires you to keep the comb in the same position as you cut. The angle at which you hold the comb determines the amount of hair that is removed. Clipper cutting with attachments. Remember, the attachments are going to be like your guards, and they're just a way for you to quickly and easily create short haircuts that have the same lengths in various areas. Then there's also fading. So fading is a tapered haircut that you do with clippers where the hair transitions from one length to the next, creating a faded look with no hard lines. This technique combines artistry with tool knowledge to achieve the best results. There are many fade styles, including a bald fade where you start from bare skin, high fades, low fades, temple fades, are also some additional fades. So learning fading does take practice. And then there's a lineup. A lineup is on one end we call it lineup. On the next we just call it an edge up. A lineup or edge up creates sharp angles in the natural hairline to change the look of your existing hairline. So this can be created with clippers or trimmers, and it is a technique that is advanced. Be sure to practice your lineup only after you have gained hair cutting experience. Other tips for clipper cutting: you want to always work against the natural growth patterns, especially at the nape on lower fades and straighter hair. Clipper directions change depending on whether you are cutting coarse, straight, or textured hair. Always work with small sections. And when using clipper over comb, the comb angle determines the length. So remember those key facts about clipper cutting. That is the end of chapter 11. It is such a robust chapter that I do recommend going into your textbook and rereading for yourself. If you have questions, make sure that you comment below, and we are here to assist you. We hope that you have learned something new, enhanced your toolbox, and we will see you soon. Have a great day.